Hey guys, welcome back! Just like I did in the last couple of years, here's my 10 most played games that were released not in 2020, but in 1990, 30 years ago. It was around that time that I was simultaneously messing around with my ZX Spectrum 128K plus 2A, with my brand new Amiga 500 and also with IBM compatible personal computers at school. So, many of the following games were experienced on more than one system, and as you'll notice, the arcade experience was determinant in most of my choices. Let's take a look. One of my favorite puzzle video games to play at the arcades and later at home on the ZX Spectrum and on the Commodore Amiga was plotting. So many coins spent with this one, trying to get through all those levels that can sometimes really mess up with our brain. And that's a good thing. It was developed and published for arcades by Taito in 1989 and a year later ported to a ton of home systems from the good hands of Ocean Software. Besides that, was also re-released back in 2005 for the PS2, Xbox and the PC as part of the Taito Legends compilation. Another Taito Legend was also a puzzle game entitled Puzznic. It was even considered the 34th best game of all time for the Amiga. It's a tile-matching puzzle arcade game, also released in 1989 for arcades and a year later for a bunch of home systems, and it's a turn-based or hot seat 2-player game. Again, this one is highly addictive, so be careful! Ocean Software was once again the company behind this faithful conversion of the arcade original. Even in 2003, a late PS1 version was released. Two really fun and addictive little games from those amazing folks at Taito. Again converted from the arcade original from 1989, Ironman Stewart Super Off-Road is extremely fun and addictive to play with up to 3 players simultaneously, plus one more controlled by the computer. There are several off-road tracks with jumps, bumps, holes, water splashing, you name it. And those figure 8 tracks are a joy to blast through, and they just look like Destruction Derby death matches, trying to avoid the other opponents. Ironman Stewart Super Off-Road is so much fun, and probably where my love for off-road racing started. I recall playing it first on a 386 machine back in school, and ended up loving it so much that I simply had to grab both the ZX Spectrum and Amiga versions. Another one that back in 2012 was included in the Midway Arcade Origins compilation for the PS3 and Xbox 360. Saint Dragon was so addictive, both on the arcades and on my ZX Spectrum, but was on the Amiga that I would later further explore it. It really lacks a deeper parallax scrolling effect, but the developer who ported the game just followed the exact same template of the arcade original from Jaleco, and that was a freaking awesome achievement. The game plays and sounds practically identical to the arcade game. Graphics are superbly drawn and colored, evoking the feel of playing the coin-op original. And despite the number of sprites on screen and the sheer size of the enemies, scrolling and animation moves at a pretty smooth pace. There isn't much to say about the plot of Saint Dragon. We play a cyborg warrior who has decided to rebel against the evil and oppressive forces of our tyrannical leaders. Like in RoboCop, we're part machine, part dragon, so I guess that we have feelings. I absolutely love Midnight Resistance on every single system to where it was ported. My favorite conversion is probably the one for the Sega Mega Drive Genesis, made by Data East themselves, but sadly, it was never released in Europe. Nowadays I can play it using my homemade arcade cabinet, but back then I could only enjoy it on the ZX Spectrum and on the Amiga. And it was awesome to see the arcade cabinet being featured in the second RoboCop movie. Ocean Software grabbed the license, and Special Effects was the team responsible for this conversion of such a highly popular coin-op game, at least here in Portugal. And I can't get this amazing soundtrack out of my mind. It's simply one of my favorites of all time. In this one, some nasty alien invaders have kidnapped our family. So obviously that our mission is to try and rescue them, going against a huge army of enemies, ranging from foot soldiers through to massive F-14s and huge floating heads that spit maggots. If you're familiar with the arcade original, you know that Midnight Resistance also offers multi-directional scrolling and huge backdrops, ranging from winding mountain trails to massive underground complexes. The two-player option remains intact, with the clever use of joystick control, allowing us to fire in 8 directions, regardless of which way we're traveling. Collecting keys dropped by the enemies will allow us to improve our firepower, and choosing the right weapon is crucial to advance in the game. It really plays like on an arcade cabinet, with huge and well-animated sprites along with smooth 8-way scrolling. Impressive! Whilst the first one was just a sort of technical demo showing off what the Amiga was capable of deliver, Shadow of the Beast 2 was, for me, the first real game in the series. And despite the third chapter being my favorite one, I have also to mention this second entry in the series cause, well, it was one of my most played games back in 1990, when I was all over my Amiga 500. Again, we play as Arbron, but now in half-beast form, wandering the lands of Karamun in search of our kidnapped infant sister. Zelek, servant to Melitoth, was responsible for the kidnapping, and we have to obviously fight our way through in order to save her, solving a variety of puzzles, entering subquests, and defeat some nasty monsters. For this one, Reflections tried really hard to enhance the basic arcade action of the first game by implementing reactive enemies for improved combat scenarios, while simultaneously expanding on the adventure game component with the aforementioned puzzles, in-game dialogues with a conversation system, and an inventory that allows to select various collectible objects and weapons that we'll need to use throughout the game. Other versions were available for the Atari ST, for the Mega Drive and Mega CD, and even for the Japanese PC variant, the FM Towns, but this original Amiga version is still, for me, the beast. I mean, the best. The Lotus Esprit was a dream car back in late 80s and early 90s, so it was a good starting point for a series of video games based around the Lotus brand. So by 1990, Magnetic Fields created the first game in the franchise, Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge, released by Gremlin Graphics, being really well received by the press and gamers of the time, in where I'm obviously included cause you know how addicted I am to the racing genre. In this one, we're allowed to race a Lotus Esprit Turbo SE, imagine that, through 32 tracks. An extremely fun split-screen multiplayer mode is also available with a choice of audio tracks to go along with it. Each circuit is packed with turns and hills, and we must manage our fuel supply so that you can finish all the laps proposed, having to occasionally visit the pit stop for refueling. Besides overtaking the other opponents, we must avoid also various obstacles and hazards, depending on what scenario we're racing on. These hazards and obstacles can be in the form of slippery road surfaces with snow or puddles of water, wooden logs or roadblocks. Such an amazing game that paved the way for many that followed. A video game developer that got their chance in the video game business by the hands of Psygnosis was Raising Hell Software, and the title that awakened Psygnosis' interest was The Killing Game Show. It's a run-and-gun shooter in where we control a robot shooting everything that moves, trying to reach the exit on this maze of platforms. With such an awesome gameplay and superb music, the game would receive scores of around 90% in practically every Amiga-related magazine back then. It was even re-released a year later for the Sega Mega Drive Genesis, but under a different name, Fatal Rewind. Raising Hell Software was then purchased by Sega, who forced the developer to change its name cause the word hell was kind of inadequate and sensitive to some people. So Raising Hell Software became Bizarre Creations, developing later down the road awesome titles like Metropolis Street Racer, the Project Gotham Racing series and Blur. I remember booting this game the first time up, not knowing what to expect. By its title, it sounded something like The Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, those were the days without internet and of pirated games with no manuals or other related stuff, in where we could have a glimpse to the game's plot or something even close to that. I guess that everyone on Earth played Golden Axe. It's one of the most fondly remembered video games ever, and also one of my first experiences on a DOS machine equipped with VGA graphics back in 1990 at school. With this amazing artwork and backstory that somewhat reminds me of the fantasy medieval scenario of Conan the Barbarian, from where the game was in fact inspired, we must guide our heroes across the besieged land of Uria, slaughter the main villain Death Adder, free the king and his daughter, and gain possession of the Golden Axe. Sounds simple, but Death Adder's foes are tough and have some of their own moves up their sleeves. Except these skeletons. And this Uria spot must be a very hot place, cause both Tyrese Flare, the Amazon chick, and Axe Battler the Barbarian spend the entire game walking around in their underwear. Okay, jokes aside, I can't simply recall other video game available till that time, in where we could cast magic spells, ride dragons and fight skeletons, all this on the backs of a giant turtle and of an eagle. Brilliant stuff!
I've seen this before.
The original Turrican grabbed me right when I first saw its loading screen, cause if you're familiar with the heaviest metal band in the world, you'll be able to identify right away the similarities. It was originally developed for the Commodore 64 and was highly praised in all technical aspects. It was extremely influenced by Metroid and Psychonix Oscar, and as you all are aware, we take control of a bioengineered warrior, originally fighting an AI antagonist called Morgul that in later games was swapped by an evil emperor called the Machine. I recall that there were some issues while converting the C64 original game to the Amiga. Rainbow Arts wanted both versions to be released at the same time, but because the Commodore 64 had a completely different architecture, another team was brought in to catch up and rewrite from scratch Turrican for the Amiga, a platform that was the most sought after in Europe by that time, in what home computers were concerned. And we can't praise Turrican solely for its beautiful graphics and top-notch gameplay. The Amiga soundtrack by Chris Ulzbach is sure of amazing and simply goes wherever I go. Such a memorable game that should be enjoyed by every single one of you. And now, there's no excuse. A Turrican anthology is coming that will include an extremely rare version of Super Turrican, the true, complete and original SNES version that was cut out due to cartridge memory restrictions and now subtitled as Director's Cut. This version in particular was until now only available on the analog Super NT. And what about Pang? Another masterful conversion by Ocean France. Both the sprites and backgrounds have been superbly designed, using full color to capture the bright and cheerful appearance of the original game from Mitchell Corporation. Even when the screen is packed with balloons and creatures, the action is still swift and smooth as silk. As for sound and music, these are truly faithful to the arcade coin-op game. It's one of those titles that we just want to have a go again and again. In Pang, we embark on this journey through 18 different locations, shooting balloons as we go. A number of rounds is played at each of the locations at various times in the day. The balloons, being balloons, bounce around screens scattered with platforms and ladders, so our mission is to simply burst the balloons, destroying them completely, because these locations and their important landmarks are in danger if we don't do so. Shields and additional weapons will gradually become available to make the going a little easier, such as the Vulcan gun and the double harpoons. However, colliding with any of the various creatures that wander around disables the weapons for a short while. There's also a time limit to pop all those balloons, so better make it fast. I'll be covering the history of Ocean France in a future video, so plenty of reasons to stay glued to It's a Pixel Thing. These were the 10 games released back in 1990 that I've played the most on the systems that I owned by then, the ZX Spectrum 128K Plus 2A and the Amiga 500, but also at school at the computer class with IBM compatible PCs like the Schneider Euro PC2 and with other home systems like the Commodore 64 over at friends' houses. Please tell me down in the comments section below your favorite games from 1990 and on what systems you used to play them. I'm really curious to know. In the meanwhile, if you've enjoyed this video, you know the drill. So thank you very much for watching and I'll catch you all in my next video. Cheers!